Howdy guys, Bookie Laura here. Now I decided quite recently to take part in a thing called ShakeTube 2017. You may have seen my video last week when we read The Taming of the Shrew and my reaction to that. This week's book, which I did take part in again, was Richard III. If you're not aware, the idea of ShakeTube is basically it's a sort of read-along that was come up with by a couple of booktubers who I'll link down below. Their idea is basically that they do a read-along where they read a Shakespeare play every week from sort of middle of August all the way through to December, and then on the Friday everybody uploads their kind of reaction videos, and it's awesome to join in to see how everybody else takes the plays and see if it might, like, if you're similar to me, to see all the understanding that you didn't get when you read the plays. But I'm cool with that. So as I said, last week we read The Taming of the Shrew, which I really enjoyed. I thought was very accessible. This week we read one of the histories, which was Richard III. I feel it's worth saying right from the get-go that I didn't find this as good as I did The Taming of the Shrew. I don't think for me it was as accessible. I found it a little more difficult to get my head around, and I didn't enjoy it as much for that reason. I feel like first off I should go into some of the plot detailing. So basically, if you're like me and you have very little historical knowledge, this could prove very useful. There's a guy called Richard. He is the Duke of Gloucester, and he is part of this huge royal family, and basically he wants to be king, and he will go to any deep dark means to get it. And it's all about his kind of manipulation and his extreme ways of getting to be king. As I'm not very knowledgeable with the old history, it's fair to say that I'm not sure how much of this is based in fact and how much of it is based on Shakespeare's interpretation. However, from my understanding is that the sort of general events, the general events are factual, but it's all how Shakespeare is interpreted and made a drama out of it, made a play out of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, to start with, I found that I was able to understand the language as easily as Taming of the Shrew, and I think I actually quite enjoyed, right from the get-go, it was much more dark, much more sinister. You were aware that this guy, Richard, he's a bad guy, he's a proper baddie, and he's going to do some bad, he's prepared to do any sort of bad stuff to get what he wants. And I kind of liked how that set it up, that you knew right from the get-go that this is going to be, this isn't any comedy, this is much darker, and I really liked that and was looking forward to all the murders and intrigue. What does that say about me? There's one bit, I wanted to tell you about one of my favourite parts, which was, well, again, I don't know what this says about me, but one of my favourite parts was when he calls upon some murderers to go and kill someone, and they're sort of discussing how they feel a bit bad about it, because there's a lot of talk about conscience in this play, which I thought was an interesting theme. But anyway, they're talking about what to do, and then he says, the first murderer says, "Remember our reward when the deed's done," and the second one goes, "Oh, I'd forgot the reward," and then all the conscience disappears and he's happy to do it, which just made me laugh a bit, because it just was exactly what this play is all about, basically. People that have a seemingly very little conscience and are happy to murder people because there's money involved. Money and power, the root of all evil. One thing that I did try this time was doing a kind of character card. I saw this on somebody else's channel, or something to do with atlases, maybe, and I thought it seemed like a great idea, so I started jotting down some of the characters and their relationships, but then I lost it, because I think that there were a hell of a lot of characters in this play, and that I found that really difficult to keep track of, both on paper or in my head. I actually went and looked it up just out of interest to see how many characters there were, and it wasn't my imagination. There were 60-something characters, and when I looked through several other Shakespeare plays, there were only 30-something characters. So I think for me, that went a long way towards why I found it so difficult. There were just too many people to keep track of, especially when I didn't have the historical knowledge that I imagine a lot of people going into this perhaps have more of an interest in history than I do, and would be aware of some of the characters in their historical sense, whereas I didn't have that. So I spent a lot of my time flitting back to the thing that I won't be able to find now because I'm under too much pressure, to the, whatever this is, the sort of descendants table in the back. I spent a lot of time flitting back to that to see how people were related and who they were, and that I think too many characters and too little historical knowledge on my part. I also find another thing he does in Shakespeare that I find quite difficult is that people are often referred to by several different names. I mean, why can't they just have one name and stick with it? That would be much easier to track. Clarence that he talks to at the start, his brother, and then they make a reference to George, and it took me a while to figure out that actually that was Clarence, and I just, too much brain power required. I could get my head around the language, but actually the characters and things were what tripped me up here. One thing that I have discovered that's worked for me really well in Taming of the Shrew and has worked really well for me here is reading out loud. I don't know why. I guess it's because you put the intonation in, you absorb perhaps better. Maybe I'm one of those people that learns better by hearing things. But I found that reading it out loud helped me to understand it. If I was reading it in my head, I was often kind of racing through and not taking in as much, so I would miss bits at plot points, etc. However, I was delighted that at one point I felt like I was really missing the point. I was missing a lot of detail and really confused, so I went and looked up a kind of plot summary online, and actually everything that was on there I knew, so I was really pleased with that. I understand it better than I think. One of my favourite lines in the play I wanted to read just because I felt like it really summed up in my head who and what Richard is. Again, this is my interpretation, which is not always that academic, so it may be incorrect, but it's in, where? Act 4, Scene 4, line 307, where he's talking to Queen Elizabeth about everything that she's lost, and she's really sad, understandably, and then he says, "But mine shall be a comfort to your age. The loss you have is but a son being king, and by that loss your daughter is made queen." And I think that really, for me, summed him up, because he didn't see everything that she'd lost. He, in his mind, all she had lost was her connection to the throne, that her son wouldn't be king. And that sums him up, because that is all he's interested in. All he wants is power and to be king, and will go to any ends to get it. So, in summary, I didn't enjoy this as much as I enjoyed Taming of the Shrew. It had, I think, too many characters and not enough historical knowledge on my part. However, again, I did find it easier to understand than I had expected. At the moment, I'm unsure as to whether I would read another one of the histories. Let me know if you think the other histories are easier to understand. If you think this is a fairly complicated one, then let me know, but that's where I'm at the moment. I'm going to keep partaking in the comedies, and I'm going to give tragedies a go, but not so sure about the histories. So we shall see. Anyway, if you're taking part in ShakeTube, then let me know. I'd love to come and check out your video and see what you thought. And if you want to argue with me about anything, then feel free. I won't be offended, I promise. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.